Hi, I'm here with Chris Resch, a member of our STEM Teachers NYC community. Chris, do you mind introducing yourself and just telling us also how long you've been engaged with STEM Teachers NYC?
Sure. So my name is Chris Resch. I teach at Montgomery High School in New Jersey by day, and by night, I am a STEM teachers workshop leader. So I lead workshops in specifically in the biology areas, as well as Socratic dialogue. And I also lead workshops for new leaders that are starting to become STEM teachers workshop facilitators. And I've been working with STEM teachers now, who for a long time, it's been a while. Um, I want to say at least 6, 7 years now. I've lost track of time.
Well, I'm going to strain that memory again. Can you
Sure.
remember how you first got involved with our community?
I do, yes. There was a fellow teacher. Her name was Dong Hong Soon. She was starting to become a workshop leader at the time for chemistry workshops, and she saw some stuff that I was doing in the classroom and thought it was really cool what I was doing in the bio classroom, and was like, "Hey, you should share that out with people." That's great, and I know this organization that happens to be doing that kind of work. And so she was the first person to introduce me to STEM Teachers NYC as an organization. Um, and shortly thereafter, I led the first 3 hour a 3 hour workshop afterwards um, in biology in the classroom, and how we can make it more interactive, more Socratic, and just engaging for students and sort of model building through labs and experiments and things like that.
It's really cool. So you got that initial nudge from a colleague, which
Hmm.
I know is always great to get kind of the compliment and then that and do this.
Yeah.
How would you say once you got, nudged into our the STEM Teachers NYC community, how would you say that being part of it has influenced your professional growth and or your career trajectory in the STEM field?
Um, Greatly. It's impacted me greatly. I'm thinking back into college and I think of learning different things of zone of proximal development and Vygotsky and all those kinds of things. But one of the things that I hadn't realized at the time when I was learning to become a teacher was the impact that collaboration with colleagues and friends can have. Um, and I think the STEM Teachers NYC community um, has allowed me to grow as a professional, as an educator. It's I've learned a lot from the workshop participants at the same time. Thinking about like true mentorship is sort of a two-way street, and I think that's really what the workshops, even though I might be facilitating one, that's really what the workshops provide, is that two-way street and open exchange of ideas. And oh, that worked great in my classroom. Let me try it in my scenario, or how can I tweak that and make that better. And so I'm constantly taking away things from any of the workshops that I facilitate because there's so many amazing teachers out there. And to have a place like or a space like STEM Teachers NYC to really unpack some of the great work that folks are doing, it's just phenomenal. And it's a breath of fresh air. I think of professional development as both as the inhale. So every day in our classrooms, we're constantly doing stuff, right? We're doing the exhale. We're saying we're grading, we're talking with students, we're talking with parents, we're filling out forms and IEPs and things like that. Um, so that's all to me in my brain an exhale, but STEM teachers is that really energizing inhale, to be able to just stop and really hone our craft with folks that are really interested in doing the same.
That's such a wonderful idea of that, the two-way street of mentorship, that collaboration, that share between not only participants, but participants and workshop leaders, people you meet at events. Um, I'm really connect with that idea of that share, that inhale, as you call it, is such a wonderful way to describe it. So
Thanks.
then
Yes.
you started as actually, did you participate in any workshops before you led, or did you jump right into leading workshops?
Um, so the summer after, so I pretty much jumped right in. So the summer after the first workshop that I led, the first 3 hour workshop that I led, um, I was asked to be, or actually it might have been the summer before. My memory's failing me a little bit, but I was asked to be part of the new leader
Mm-hmm.
workshop group from the AMTA. So the American Modeling Teachers Association was um, trying to pull in folks that have been trained in modeling instruction to lead workshops, and bio was a very new sort of
Mm-hmm.
avenue for modeling instruction. I had taken a 3 week modeling workshop class in New Jersey prior to that, and was really into it. And was like, I got to do this in my classroom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, um, and that just so happened to be hosted by STEM Teachers NYC, the leadership training part. So, Mark Schoberg and Craig Bushka were the leaders for that training. Um, and that was sort of the first longer term workshop that I've taken from
Mm-hmm.
from STEM teachers, and just being on the receiving end has just kind of energized me more to do and try more things. Um, and so that's kind of how I got hooked into the whole STEM Teachers NYC network.
Okay.
So those
Yeah.
two, the weekend folks that have been doing stuff like Dong Hong, but then also
Mm-hmm.
being inspired by leaders like Craig and Mark that um, did the leadership training for the AMTA.
Nice. So, taking that inspiration as a participant, can you think of any time um, or discuss a workshop that you led that was particularly meaningful for you and maybe what made that stand out?
I think it would have to be the first 2 week long workshop I led over the summer. I think that I think that to me had a huge impact because um, one, you have teachers from the area that are spending 2 weeks of their summer um, just talking about biology and learning about the stuff that has
Yeah.
been coming out of our brains over in Montgomery. And wanting to hear all about that and learning from that, I think was uh, had an incredible impact on me. And two, like I said, spending 2 weeks with colleagues, really diving deep. It's hard to do
Mhm.
that in 3 hours on a weekend, but
Yeah.
really spending 2 weeks just diving deep into, okay, you asked this particular question. Now, what was going through your brains when you decided to ask that particular question, or what did you hear the student saying in student mode at this particular time that prompted that particular question? Like just really getting into the nitty gritty of the process and of the craft. Of teaching and the way that we can teach Socratically and in a biology classroom is was I mean that was extremely cool. It was just a
Yeah.
lot of fun from a education nerd
Yeah, that
perspective.
does sound great. I feel like even the best professional development, sometimes you leave with a lot of questions. And those questions are wonderful because it's like, this inspires me now to do my own research, to do my own experimentation, and then come back. But as you're saying, with the 2 weeks, it's almost like now I still have that community to dive into those questions day
Exactly.
after day and go through and, iron sharpens iron, hone our
Yeah.
skills together as we're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's the other you touched upon it. That's the other really cool piece is we still talk, like the folks that were in that first workshop, we still talk. We still send emails back and forth, texts, ask questions of each other to see what it is that worked in their particular context of their classroom versus ours and things like that. So it's really cool to have that community and to be part of building that community. It's extremely humbling. Um, so that I mean, it's just cool. There's no other way
That
to say it. Yeah.
That does sound cool. I'm like an outsider now, like peeking in, is like, what's happening over there? That seems pretty awesome. So, uh, as a leader, obviously building that community was a real big success story. But when you're entering into workshops, let's say this summer you're leading an upcoming workshop, what are your goals? How do you hope to influence or inspire other educators within the community?
So at the end of the summer workshop, I hope participants feel empowered to try new things, to experiment with new ideas, to feel free to collaborate with others that are in the workshop. Even though we might be in different buildings across different states and different parts of New York City and things like that. Um, the it's biology has always had this stigma of being a subject where there's just tons of memorization, where you just have memorized this step and this step and that step and all those kinds of things. And I'm really hoping that participants can see that there's another way to teach biology besides just having students memorize steps of glycolysis or just kind of rote memorization of Punnett squares and things like that, or that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Like, yes, those are good things to know, but is there another way that we can get students to understand those more deeply besides just kind of doing the rote recall? And so I'm hoping to equip the participants with tools and strategies and techniques um, that allow them to start to move in that direction and to start to take their classroom into a direction where it's not just I know many things and you do not sort of classroom dynamic kind of thing, um, where they feel that they can set a tone and create an environment within their classroom where it's um, students feel open and uh, excited to ask questions and to build their understanding rather than just kind of been banking into their brains.
So that's a wonderful description of what the end goal is for the Socratic dialogue and workshop, and also kind of the methods to getting there. So you just gave what could be an amazing 30-second sales pitch. Do you want to also just name your workshop so that the people who hear those wonderful goals and those strategies know where to look?
Yes, absolutely. So and pretty soon I'll be teaching, I'll be facilitating a workshop called Socratic Dialogue, which is a weekend workshop. So that's kind of a short term um, zoom in version of just one particular skill in the toolbox that you can use. But then over the summer, I'll be facilitating an interactive biology workshop where that tool plus many others are going to be kind of out on full display for everybody to learn about.
Nice. That's wonderful. Okay, so you work with our new leader huddles, you lead them or co-lead them. You are the expert to go to on this next question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
And it's what advice would you give to educators who are considering becoming workshop leaders for STEM Teachers NYC?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I think so. It's interesting that question's interesting because of the last new leader huddle we had, the first one, I should say. Um, One of the questions we asked the new leaders was, "What's your superpower?" And that's sometimes a really hard thing to identify for yourself, especially when we're in the trenches of the classroom and we're trying this, that, and the other thing, and sometimes things work and sometimes things don't. And so it's easy to kind of get lost in that day-to-day sort of thing, and it's hard, so then it becomes hard to identify, like, what is my superpower? um and I think for me the biggest thing was um having encouragement from colleagues. um having colleagues come in and say, hey, that's really great, that needs to get out there. Other teachers need to know about it. Even though myself, I did not feel like it was quote unquote ready to get out there into the public. I think trusting the colleagues around you that are seeing what you're doing in the classroom, that are seeing what you're doing in workshops, that are hearing the questions that you're asking. I think that is a huge sort of first step into getting into the world of leading workshops. And to the other half, I would say, is also to keep in mind that there's the fear of being the expert, so to speak, of like, I don't feel like I'm the expert. It's sort of like the imposter syndrome type of thing. And knowing that even though we may not have read every single book or idea on a particular subject, just knowing that you're doing something great in the classroom, and knowing from your colleagues and friends and everybody that's like, that has to get out there. I think that's those two things are the biggest thing that I would say for new leaders is to kind of to think about. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling a little bit with, with this answer.
I mean, what I'm hearing is like twofold. One is like, take the compliment, if your colleagues are saying you're doing great work and it's work they're interested or would like you to share, please share it. Like trust your colleagues. And the other one is like, trust yourself. You don't have to be an expert on all things, but you do have skills to share, and the field will benefit from you sharing them. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to share what you have. And I think it goes back to that two-way street you talked about early in our conversation, that if you're sharing what you have, others will share with you, and it will be a collaborative growth.
There was and just listening to what you're saying, there was something that I recall. I think it was Craig Bushka that had mentioned once that he likes to build his workshops with his participants. And I think that really speaks to, in my mind, both of those halves, both of those parts that you were describing of, it starts with collaboration where you have your friends and colleagues that you trust say, this is great, it's awesome, get it out. Like, other folks need to see this. And it continues with not necessarily being the expert in the room, but being the facilitator in the room, saying, this is the stuff that's just worked really well for me, but being mindful of that collaborative piece and that mentorship piece that we were talking about earlier, of it being a genuine mentorship, two-way road.
I feel like every answer you give is starting to like perfectly transition into the next thing I want to ask about.
Oh, okay.
So great job with that, because you're talking about that building collaboratively. So I'm wondering, what do you think sets STEM Teachers NYC workshops apart from other professional development experiences?
It's really true to the motto of for teachers by teachers about teaching. I think in many other districts, and just even in my district, in my own experience, you have somebody like a consultant that comes in and gives you the PD and talks about all sorts of different things. But they've been out of the classroom for a while. And that's not to knock any of their expertise in any stretch, but I think the strength is that all the facilitators are teachers actively teaching in a classroom. So they are in the trenches. They see the day-to-day stuff. They've tried the stuff with their kids. They've seen where the pitfalls come, where the common misconceptions are, like all that stuff that is highly reactive to and contextualized to teaching and learning, they're doing at that moment. and that's something that I don't think you can replicate in many other cases where um, it's 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 hard to see. I mean, we talk about how classrooms change over years and stuff like that. And I think that's one big advantage of STEM Teachers NYC facilitators is that they're there while the changes are occurring. They're hearing everything. They're in the trenches. They see all of what's happening and how it works. And that you can't put a price tag on that. That's huge.
Yeah, there's an immediacy. There's no,
Exactly.
I observe a classroom, I hear from teachers that this is going on, I process it, then I go and lead a
Mhm.
workshop. That middle section's taken out. It's somebody seeing it, feeling it, and immediately going as soon as possible, responding to that in
Mhm.
professional development workshops, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think they could speak to the immediacy piece, absolutely. Immediacy with the students, but also immediacy with other things in terms of how administrators reacted to you experimenting and how parents have reacted to you experiment. Like there's just all those different facets of what a teacher does on a daily basis that workshop facilitators that are in the room understand. And that's the strength of our workshop facilitators, I think.
Yeah. So I feel like you've painted a great picture about kind of the value a participant would
Mm-hmm.
receive from our workshops. I'm wondering the value as a leader. You've talked about that two-way street,
Mm-hmm.
but can you speak to are there specific skills or insights that you have gained through your leadership role that you apply in your classroom or in your professional life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just going referencing back to that first workshop over the summer
Mhm.
that I led with Glenn Stewart, it was really cool. One of the things I talked a little bit about that granular level piece, um, and just sort of experimenting and tinkering with student questions that we can ask students and ways to get students to open up and things like that. Um, there were ideas in that workshop that I had not thought of. Ways of asking questions that I had never thought of before. I was like, oh, I gotta steal that. That's awesome. Um, so I mean, very, very immediately within my classes that next year, I was starting to use some of that phrasing and starting to try out some of those different ideas. Um, and they've worked great. I mean, so it's had an immediate effect on my classroom and the way that I teach. Um, but I think it's also reinforced for me the path that I'm taking my sort of philosophy in too. For me to hear that there are other like-minded teachers out there that want biology instruction to look this way. Um, and to not just be the rote memorization piece. That to me is extremely reinforcing. And so I've taken that momentum and just kind of plugged it right back into my classroom too. And even my conversations with administrators and just kind of pushing wherever I can, just kind of push in that direction and keep that ball moving in that way. Um, so it's sort of the on the one hand, there's the tangible, I'm doing that, I'm stealing that. And on the other
Yeah,
hand, there's the excitement and momentum that I get after leading a workshop that translates right back into my classroom and any conversation I have with my administrators and colleagues and things like that.
yeah. I feel like that is such a mirror to what we hope, what I personally hope as a participant in professional development. I get both things I can use immediately and energy to continue my path down that concept, down that idea. As long as I get both those things, I feel fulfilled as a participant in a workshop. And it sounds like what you're saying is you're getting both those things also as a leader in the workshop.
Exactly. And I think that's what I mean by the mentorship piece. It's authentic membership mentorship is that two-way street. It's as much as my inhale
Yeah.
as it is I'm hoping for all the participants.
Well, that's spectacular. I feel like you have really told us the whole shape of the workshop experience, both as a leader and a participant in STEM Teachers NYC. I can't thank you enough for sharing with us, and just gonna ask for closing thoughts. What message would you like to leave with the broader STEM education community?
With the broader STEM education community.
Yeah, I left you
Um,
a very tight,
yeah.
easy thing to talk about, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of things I could go up with, but I think my kind of ending message I guess would be is um oh, I'm just thinking about this for a second.
Okay.
Um I think don't be afraid to experiment in trying new things in the way that you teach in your classroom. I think there's comfort in doing things the way we've always done them, and doing things like that in the way that I've experienced them when I was a student back in high school. And there is a certain amount of comfort to that, but um, don't let that be the barrier to trying new things in your classroom and really trying to elevate the educational experience of your students. I think there's a huge amount of creativity in our craft, besides just the science piece. And so, let that creativity just try it. Let that creativity out and try different things. If you think that your students would learn better using, a different method or something, it's okay to try that. And it's okay uh if it doesn't go as planned. It always does sometimes, but there's always going to be that one that you're like, no, I should have tried it that way. But um don't be afraid to let your creativity shine in your practice.
I think that's a wonderful message to go out on. Chris, thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise with us.
You're welcome anytime.